In today's video, we're going to be having a look at Bitcoin's fall. We're also going to be looking at what's going on with US taxes and a little bit on the ECB. Hello and welcome to another acysecurities daily report video. My name is Alistair Schultz and I'm going to be your host through today's trading journey. The first thing to look at today is a little bit on Bitcoin. Bitcoin has lost about 11% overnight, and there's been a couple of reasons for it, for a change. Usually when you would look at what's going on with Bitcoin, the reasons for are quite ambiguous. So in this instance, a report has actually suggested a double spend. And for those of you who might need to Google that, it is where the same token is used twice in two separate transactions. Now, this is usually something that can be counterproductive, or at least it's not good for the blockchain side of things. And of course, they do try and avoid it from ever happening. But in this instance, it seems a bug in the code has caused a double spend to occur, which does suggest some level of manipulation on the blockchain level, but nothing has been confirmed at this stage. Now, what we have seen though, and one of the experts on Bitcoin has chimed in, I found this quote on Twitter of him, where he was saying what we saw today was a one block reorganization. These occur on average every 2 weeks and are a normal part of the consensus algorithm. And that was by Andreas Antonopoulos. Now, regardless of his view on that or not, it does raise a few questions about the use of Bitcoin and how well the blockchain network is running, especially considering it's quite an ambiguous response to something that we haven't actually seen happen before all that often. And a double spend obviously comes with some negative connotations. So moving on from Bitcoin, we're going to have a look at Janet Yellen. And Yellen has been yelling about taxes. Taxes are likely to be a fair amount of talk in what's going on this year with Joe Biden as the now acting president. Of course, the talk that Yellen was actually talking about was saying that their taxes are likely going to be fast-tracked. The questionable parts are really that Trump has his idea of sub $400,000 tax cuts. So anyone earning under $400,000 was going to be getting tax cuts. Whether they stay remains to be seen, and there's not been really any clarity on that yet. As well as that, we also have seen some rebuttals and rebuffments on the jump from 21 to 28% for corporate tax. So Republicans have really pushed back against that, and Yellen has handled herself sort of saying, look, this is something that's going to be an improvement for the economy. The question really comes is that, or the Republicans' point was that they're going to be decreasing the ability to be competitive for international trade and along those sort of lines. Of course, there's also, Yellen was stating that higher IRS, or the tax department of the US, was going to be the one making a lot of this enforcement and was likely going to be increasing, particularly on those who might be on the high tax threshold rates. So they will be, looking at people who do have a fair bit of wealth, and there'll be more audits occurring. We've also seen that there's likely to be incentives for those that are climate-friendly businesses, but not so much any penalties for those that aren't. So there is a little bit of differentiation from what we were first hearing about that, where there might be penalties for banks and such who were offering liquidity and or loans to oil companies and anyone that was seen to be detrimental or damaging towards the climate. As well as that, we're still, just as a side note, we're still waiting for the Senate to vote in Janet Yellen, though she is the prime candidate, and she looks like she has all but got the position of Treasury Secretary. So more on that later. We will hear more about taxes coming. A number of other pieces were discussed as well, but I saw these as some of the standouts because obviously a jump up to 28% for corporate tax will affect some of the profitability and the revenue on earnings that come from some of the companies that are publicly listed. Now, moving on, one of the other parts to look at from last night was US unemployment claims. We saw 900,000 more claims for the week, but that wasn't the biggest factor to really consider. When we got to Christmas time and just afterwards, the current standing of pandemic support money had a little bit of a lapse. There was a gap between the Christmas progress or payments at Christmas time and about a week or two after that. And that's left about 3 million people without receiving a check of any kind to support themselves. So, whilst we're seeing some slight improvement on the claims, it doesn't necessarily mean it's because they're getting jobs. And it's actually probably not because there's improved employment conditions, unfortunately. So that is something to consider. When you look a little bit deeper into the stats, it does give that as a little bit more definitive as an answer. And so therefore, we are seeing probably a little bit of a lull and a bit of a problem for the labour force, and they're still struggling to get that recovery that they need in the US. Now, moving on, the ECB, the European Central Bank, announced yesterday that they were going to be doing no changes to rates and that there would probably be more advice to come in March. We also know that the pandemic response purchases that they're doing, which were on asset purchase programs, very similar to the US, we're going to be staying with the 1.2 billion US or 1.85 trillion euros that they are handing out. So that is going to remain the same at this point in time until the March announcement, where they may make some changes then. Either way, what we heard from Christine Lagarde was that they were seeing the pandemic as still being an ongoing challenge and a difficult point for them to really get across the road for recovery to happen. So we are still, obviously, when she states that, we're still seeing problems with employment, we're still seeing businesses run into issues, and obviously we're still seeing lots of infections and deaths. In fact, we saw another daily record for deaths so far for a single day globally in the last 48 hours. So definitely some things to keep in mind when we look at vaccines, stimulus, and general market optimism at the moment. Now, moving on, the news ahead of today, a bit of a light day for us. We've had a lot of news the last couple of days between earnings and central banks and everything else in between. Tonight, we have European manufacturing and services PMI from a number of European countries. I think there's about 4 or 5 to look at. We've also got retail sales out of Canada and natural gas storage, and of course, a little bit more manufacturing and services PMI out of the US as well. So if you are going to be trading the Friday night session, keep an eye on some of those. And of course, if you have any questions from today's video, perhaps it's from some of my other videos, anything at all, please feel free to send me an email or even get in contact through any of my social media channels. I will happily respond. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and that way you will be able to get more great content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.